Species.
Okay, so our guest today is an associate professor of political science at the University of Miami who studies public opinion and mass media with a focus on conspiracy theories, misinformation, and disinformation. He's the co-author of American Conspiracy Theories, editor of Conspiracy Theories and the People Who Believe Them, and his latest book, Conspiracy Theories, a primer, is available now for purchase. Dr. Uscinski, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
So we have a lot of things we want to get to with you. Excited to have you here, but we wanted to start by just having you tell us a little bit about your background as a political scientist and what led to your interest in conspiracy theories.
So I got a PhD in American politics, and I was focused my dissertation on the profit incentives that drive media outlets to report certain stories over others. So you would ask yourself, why are they reporting this tonight instead of some other thing, right? And if you think about it, when people see the news, they think, well, what's the news? As if the things that journalists pick to report on are quote unquote the news, as if these stories were brought down from up on high.
Right.
But I mean, these news decisions are the product of many different factors, with one of them being, what does the audience want to hear about? So I spent a few years investigating that and showing that as much as we think that news influences what people think, often it's the exact opposite. It's that what people think influences what reporters report, right? And that's sort of put on steroids now, where, you know, a lot of online news outlets would be like, well, you know, you got to write stories that are going to generate clicks, because that's how we get advertising revenue. So they are keenly aware of this, and they have ways of measuring this, obviously. So the incentive there is going to be to go after what pulls in audiences, right?
Yeah.
So if you look, like during the Obama administration, what a lot of people in conservative media had said was, you know, if you put out a story that has something about Michelle Obama, you would have tons of clicks, because everyone in that space who would be reading conservative news outlets, you know, despised her, and anything she said, they were like, ah. So it would generate clicks. So that's essentially what I worked on. And then after I started here at University of Miami, I wish I had a more romantic story about it, but my co-author came to me and said, "Hey, conspiracy theories." And he didn't really have much to go on, except
that's a good pitch, to be honest.
Yeah.
Conspiracy theories.
And I said no. I was like, I don't want to do this. I said, this is way off the beaten path. Nobody cares about this. No one in political science is studying this. No one's working on it. There's no data for us to use, really. I mean, very, very few public opinion data sets have been created that were really looking at this. So I said, everything we do is going to have to be very much from the ground up. It's going to be a long slog. And he said, yeah. So we did it, and it took 5 years to get the book out. And then he was smart. He left the project after the book, and I've sort of been stuck with it. So given my training and what I've done thus far, I'm sort of, you know, I guess what I say on my Vita is that I'm uniquely positioned to study conspiracy theories and fake news in this current era, when what it really is I sort of stepped in it. And now I'm a little bit stuck.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's incredibly relevant, and it makes me wonder: has the definition of a conspiracy theory, have you seen that change? Like, is that broadened almost? Like, I guess when I would think about conspiracy theories 10 years ago, it was like the Mel Gibson movie, right? Like the one guy that kind of believes nutty things. But I feel like I'm hearing the term more and more now, just in politics and in everyday life. Seems like there's something new. Are there more conspiracy theories? Is the definition broader? What's going on?
Well, you are hearing the term more now. I mean, if we're just talking about media coverage. So about, I think 10 years ago, I started a Google alert on the term conspiracy theory. And I used to get back about 5 stories a day with that in it, and usually none on the weekends. And since, I think, 2015, 2016, it's been about 100 a day.
Yeah.
So journalists are paying attention to this, and you can do the same thing if you look at any individual news outlet. So if you look at New York Times and go back 40 years, they had maybe a handful of articles that came out in a year that had the term in it, and now it's ubiquitous in their coverage because it's just part of our political rhetoric now.
Yeah.
But in terms of are there more theories, that's a very different question. So what I would say is there are an infinite number of theories out there and an infinite number of versions of each of those. So they're ideas, right?
Yeah. Well, it may be, but so I'm wondering if more things are now being labeled conspiracy theories. I was listening to you on another program and you mentioned you were talking about whitewater, for example, as a conspiracy theory. And I'm like, gosh, I remember hearing about that, but I wouldn't have thought of it in that with that term. And I don't know, maybe people are realizing things that wouldn't have been labeled as conspiracy theories in the past. They're now calling them conspiracy theories. I don't know if there's any that rings true or not to you.
Well, the definitions aren't fixed, and it's not like when I write about this for a journal article, I go to the dictionary and then use that definition. As what I have to do is define my term, and then I will define it differently than other scholars will define it. So the way I define it is an accusatory perception in which you have a small group of powerful people working in secret for their own benefit against the common good, and in a way that undermines our bedrock ground rules against the widespread use of force and fraud. This perception has not been verified by the appropriate experts with open data and methods that can be refuted by other experts or by the public. Mouthful, but
I was gonna say, that was mine too. But you said it first, so you get credit. But well, that last part's really important, I guess, right? Because all up through the whole thing, you're going, okay, but what if it's true? But then it's like, it's got to be backed up by experts, and it has to be able to be proven wrong, whatever that term is.
So there's an important thing here. I mean, the same word can be used to do different things, right? So in the legal sense, conspiracy would mean something very different, right? Like, oh, they conspired to knock over the 7-Eleven. Well, that's not the kind of thing I care about, right? Or she conspired with her lover to kill off the cuckold husband. I don't care. That's not widespread. That's not the sort of stuff that I'm concerned about. But those would be called conspiracies in a courtroom, right? But that's very different than how I use it. And then my real concern is sort of separating what involves small groups of powerful people operating in secret versus other stuff that are just, either like fringier ideas that are unproven. Like ESP is not a conspiracy theory. Bigfoot is not a conspiracy theory.
Right.
Aliens are not a conspiracy theory. If you say government is hiding evidence of aliens, then yes, that's a conspiracy theory. Sort of separating out things that aren't exactly the same, and then really trying to draw the distinction between what is a conspiracy theory and what is a conspiracy. So how can we know, or let me put it a better way, how do we refer to ones that we're pretty sure are true and the ones that we're not that sure are true?
Right. Yeah. So the less sure we are that it's true, maybe the more it's in the conspiracy theory, umbrella.
Well, the distinction I draw is that, if you have a group of experts who have examined something and said this really happened, then I would say, because I'm not a person to be able to say, like, let's say you allege some conspiracy happening somewhere else at some other time. How can I know what that's about?
Right.
Like, who am I to judge any of it? I'm not an expert in any of those issues. I'm not there. I don't know anything. So I shouldn't be judging it. I, just like all other things, I don't get into an airplane and then go to the cockpit and fly away. Right.
Sure.
You've got to know your place. So the better thing to do is say, well, when the experts say that this is a conspiracy, then I will agree with them and then believe it. But until such time, it's a conspiracy theory, meaning it could be true or not, but I'm not going to believe it until the experts have said that I should.
Well, speaking of experts, I mean, I don't know how much we want to talk about the COVID stuff. But you talked about media, and in getting clicks and sort of where things are, it feels like people are less trusting the media, and maybe that's also people are not trusting experts as much, or don't know who the experts should be, and there seems to be confusion with how we should be thinking about the COVID, which is pandemic, which has led to conspiracy theories there as well, right?
Well, anything that becomes political, people don't care about what scientists and experts say. They care about what their preferred political party says.
Right.
So, or they like to go with what they already believe. So when people say they're not trusting scientists anymore, well, I'm not sure when they did. I mean, maybe there was some magic time when they did, but it hasn't been recently. I mean, when you ask on surveys, generally people do hold scientists in high regard. But for issues that become politicized, opinions will polarize based on what our political elites are doing. So, I mean, climate change is a perfect example of this. I mean, as the scientific consensus has gotten stronger, people have sort of bifurcated in their views on it. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing: it's not like the people who believe in climate change do that because they went and read the Journal of Climatology, right, and examined the data and have determined that's the right model. No, they're just listening to their preferred politicians, and then the people on the right who say no, it's not real. They're just listening to Senator Imhoff, who walks onto the floor of the Senate with a snowball and says, this proves it's not happening. Yeah. So
I was going to do the same thing today, but the humidity here in Richmond kind of cut into that. So I apologize if you see wet spots all over me. That's why that blew up on me. Can I have that one? Yeah, cool. So a statement you've made before, which I really like, is conspiracy theories are for losers. But you don't mean that in a sense that I think people might take it at face when you say it. What do you mean when you say conspiracy theories are for losers?
So I mean it descriptively rather than pejoratively, as you point out, but that hasn't earned me any favors with conspiracy theorists.
I'm sure. Sorry about that. We'll try to help. We'll find our conspiracy theory friends when we're done and try to put in a good word for you.
So my co-author, Joe Parent, came up with that phrase, but it was when we were sort of building data on this 10 years ago, we were going through the letters to the editor of the New York Times. And we got about 1,000 letters a year over 120 years. And we started pulling out all the ones that had a discussion of a conspiracy theory in it. And what we found over time was that the party that was in power was getting accused of conspiring. Mm-hmm. So they were the lightning rod for the accusation. So when Republicans were in power, it was Republicans, the wealthy capitalists who were getting accused. And then it would flip when a Democrat was the president, and then it'd be Democrats, socialists, communists are out to get us. So you sort of see this pendulum swinging back and forth, following power going back and forth. So that's why we say that. And if you want to think of a very simple example, if you have a sports contest and somebody wins, somebody loses, who complains? It's not the winner. Right. The winner goes, no, everything's hunky-dory. The referees called it perfect. But the losers are like, we were cheated. Because it's always easier to say, we were cheated, the other team cheated, the referees were biased or something like that, than it is to look in the mirror and say, well, they beat us and we didn't do A, B, and C right, and we could do better next time. No one wants to do that.
I was going to say, I've been in many a locker room where we were blaming the refs for the loss. I don't think we've ever complained about the referees after a win.
We won despite all the ref did against us.
That's a great point, because you do see these things spring up after elections. Mm-hmm. I mean, do you have any thoughts? I mean, so the losers kind of concoct these conspiracy theories. Do you think that the conspiracy theories that are going on, I think like QAnon being, I don't even know if you call QAnon a conspiracy theory. It's just sort of like this big umbrella for conspiracy theories, will have an effect on the election? Do you see conspiracy theories having effect on elections?
Yes, in this sense. But to answer your first question, I mean, QAnon is what I would call is a conspiracy cult. Right. It's that our concern about it isn't so much the conspiracy theories. It's that they have a group identity and they seem to be being led by this person or person's cue. and they seem to want to act out on their fantasies.
Mm-hmm.
None of the conspiracy theories in Q are new. It's all just rehashed stuff. I mean, the idea that a pedophile deep state is working against the president might sound new and shocking, but that's the plot of Oliver Stone's JFK from 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So even the wackiest stuff is old sauce here. In terms of affecting the election, so it's an empirical regularity. I found that the losers after the election, there's a portion of them, maybe a third to half of the losing party will say they were cheated for whatever reason, and we can poll on that every 4 years, and we find the same thing. So what I've been doing since 2012 is I ask people prior to the election, if your candidate doesn't win, will the outcome have been due to fraud? And then, equal numbers of both parties say yes.
Sure.
And then when you ask after the election and say, was the outcome due to fraud? Only the losing party will say yes. And it's largely the same people. We were cheated. So that's going to happen no matter what. And that's the thing. In a lot of ways, I don't take all these fraud accusations very seriously in the sense that, do I think they're based on something real? Well, they could be, but the accusations would have been happening regardless. So, the Democrats lost in 2016 in a big way, and it was unexpected to somebody who they despised, and he must be a Russian agent.
Mm-hmm.
He must be a Russian agent. So all of that stuff was really them not being able to come to grips with the fact that they lost. So they had to come up with a conspiracy theory. And you can find that after every election. It's going to happen now. And you have the same thing in every election leading up to it. There's going to be accusations. Well, that side's going to engage in fraud. That side's going to engage in fraud. And that happens every time. And you see it now with people saying, Trump is going to shut down the post office. And then Trump saying, well, they're allowing mailed-in balloting to rig the election.
Right.
So the rhetoric is new to the Trump age in the sense that you have the president making fraud an election issue. That's not normal, and that's really due to him.
Mm-hmm.
But the public sentiments here are fairly normal and to be expected.
So it sounds like, or I'm not going to put words in your mouth there. So are conspiracy theories more left-wing oriented or right-wing oriented, or is it kind of a equal distribution?
This is the thing, is that when we say conspiracy theories, that's a really big bucket, right? So you have an infinite number of ideas. And if I said, well, we're just going to look at, accusations that accuse Democrats of conspiring, like the birther theory or stuff like that, then it's going to look like people on the right are a bunch of conspiracy cranks, right? And vice versa.
Right. So
when we correlate things like partisanship and political ideology to conspiracy beliefs, you run the risk of making it look like one group or another are more conspiratorial, than perhaps they really are, and that's just the decision of what conspiracy theories you're focusing on. When I measure what's underneath the hood, which is what is the predisposition to believe conspiracy theories in the first place, I find that's equal between right and left. Some studies have found that it's a little bit more on the right. Other studies have found it's a little bit more on the left. I've been polling on this for 9 years now. It's pretty even between right and left. And what a lot of this comes down to is just, what do we say counts as a conspiracy theory? Because I'll give you this neat example from 2016. Everybody was freaking out that Donald Trump said the election was going to be rigged.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. That's inappropriate rhetoric. It's not true, and he shouldn't have been doing that. But on the other side, you had Bernie Sanders saying everything is rigged.
Right.
Now, what's worse? Right? That one election is going to be rigged, or everything is rigged. And Bernie Sanders was just as much of a conspiracy or used conspiracy theories just as much as Trump did. It's just he was constrained in the conspiracy theories. He only had one. That the 1% controls everything. And people on the left say, well, that's not conspiracy theory, that doesn't count. And they'll either say it's true, which it really isn't, or that he's just using hyperbole, which if you look at what he says, to me it's like screw off if you want to rehabilitate something the guy repeats over and over and over and over again.
Right.
So it's once you start even-handedly including the rhetoric that the left uses, then you see that it's happening on both sides with equal frequency. You
had mentioned kind of going under the hood and people that were maybe predispositioned to believe conspiracy theories. Is there maybe kind of like not an ideal person, but maybe if you're saying here's someone who's most likely to believe in conspiracy theories are going to have these common traits?
So one of my co-authors likes to use this phrase. He says they walk among us. So it's not like it's those people over there,
right?
And you could see them. I mean, because if you close your eyes and imagine that prototypical conspiracy theorist in your head, it's probably some white dude who's middle-aged, living in a basement, with a ham radio. But that's a tiny number of people. When you look at this disposition and how it's spread across the country, it's spread evenly across men and women, across races. The bigger issues that I find is that people who are more educated tend to have less of this disposition. People who make more money tend to have less of it. Why that is, it's not entirely clear. As a educator, I would like to think that the job I do leads people away from believing in just anything, but I'm not convinced that's the case. I mean, so it could be working in two ways. It could be that they come and the more classes they take, the more educated they are, the less they're going to engage with unproven ideas and believe them. Could also be the case that higher education isn't that welcoming to hardcore conspiracy. If someone contacted me and said, hey, I want to prove that Bush blew up the Twin Towers in 9/11, I want to come work with you, I'd be like, delete. Yeah. So,
right.
And just the same thing with income too. It could be the case that people who make more money, they feel much more comfortable, so they're not going to be disposed towards believing the world's out to get all of us.
Right. Well, going back to incentives, right? They're way less incentivized to believe in. Yeah.
So, but flip it on the other hand. Flip it the other way. If you were hiring, a head biologist at your university, are you going to hire someone who thinks that the theory of evolution is a conspiracy among Satanists to destroy God's word? No. Or are you going to hire a banker who thinks the Jews control the economy? Yeah. It's not going to work out that way. So the forces could be going both ways, but those seem to be the bigger predictors of who and who not.
Yeah, that would be a fun interview to sit in for your theoretical banker. Before we we hire you, we have one last question just to make sure we're all on the same page.
Right. Yeah. I wonder too, like, what do you have any I guess grasp on like the demographics when it comes to, when I say demographics, I don't mean the normal way you think about that, but conspiracy theorists, is there a breakdown between like true believers that are dyed in the wool conspiracy theorists versus dabblers that are just curious about it versus trolls? Like, do you have any idea of like how much of this is trolling? Because sometimes I see,
well, there's the one birds aren't real, that's a fake.
Oh yeah,
it's made to sell T-shirts from what I've put together.
Well, as far as we know, it's fake. It could be real, but so I mean, I don't know. It's kind of a funny question, but sometimes I wonder. I see stuff and I'm like, do people really believe this? Or are there trolls that are trying to get other people into that to believe this stuff?
So both. So we've been polling on this for a long time, and there have been some scholars who've done work on trying to make sure that we're actually measuring sincere beliefs. And the answer is yes. I mean, what people are telling us on surveys is pretty sincere. Okay. If anything, we might be underestimating conspiracy beliefs in our surveys, because there is some social desirability that will pop up sometimes. But not much. So with that said, I think our numbers are pretty accurate. Now, in terms of the stuff that we see online, this is a really important question right now, because take, for example, QAnon, where, the headlines especially the past couple of weeks, are just going on and on about how it's big and it's growing, it's going mainstream, it's taking over America, and they have no public opinion data, no surveys to back up any of these claims at all. All they have is, well, there's 800 Facebook groups and X million of hits or comments or something on Twitter or Facebook or whatever.
Right.
And it's hard to know, because you follow QAnon on Twitter, and it's like these accounts, they don't really look that real, many of them.
Right.
You don't know how much of the activity is sincere or authentic or part of some manipulation effort. That's not to say that none of it's sincere or authentic. It's just to say it's hard to know how much is real and how much isn't. And then when we go and poll on it, it's one of the least believed conspiracy theories that I poll on. Yeah, the news keeps saying it's huge and getting bigger, and it's like, no, it's absolutely not. And the journalists know this, and they just they don't want to pay attention, perhaps because they like the clicks.
Yeah.
Perhaps that could be a motivating factor. And it's like you see people getting like ratioed on Twitter, things happening there. And then a little bit of research shows that, oh my gosh, these are bots, right? Like, so somebody that's good at technology that knows this stuff can fake stuff like this too. So
I think Pew had a study out there too recently, and it said something to the effect of, most people aren't going to Twitter and talking about politics. It's a small number of people who are tweeting about politics, and even a smaller number is responsible for most of the political tweets.
Yeah.
So,
but they are so loud.
They're so loud. But here's, I'm going to throw out a really quick personal pet peeve, and I've got one more question, and then I want to see if you'll stick around and play this game with us. But I have a pet peeve of the news, as you mentioned before, articles that just post people's tweets. What is that? Have you noticed that? You click on articles about it's like the reaction to whatever, and it's just a bunch of like influencers' tweets. I don't know. How am I supposed to take that? Like, should I believe these people's opinions?
Well,
like, what's
it gets
happening?
you to click on it, and it's going to get
clicked
you,
on it,
and it's going to get you angry when you read it, because whatever it's going to say.
Well, it's a new form of journalism where so and so said this on Twitter, and then someone else. Somebody without even a blue check said this, and then someone else said this, and we see these controversies pop up every once in a while, where it's like somebody said something racial about a Disney movie or something like that, and then you trace it back to the original account, and it's like, it does not look real at all. Yeah. It's like this is some sort of bot or a fake account or something. Yeah. I mean, I get this quite a bit. This particular style of journalism where I get calls from journalists, and they're like, well, I saw some new conspiracy theory on Twitter yesterday, and it's taking over the world. Do you care to comment on it? And I'm like, do I have to? And it's like, I tell them, I say, just because you saw it on Twitter and 50 people click like, doesn't mean it's taking off or going to be big or going to influence anyone. And the thing is, most of these conspiracy theories, what they don't get is they're here today and gone tomorrow.
Right.
Well, we're seeing it every week. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we wanted to bring a new segment into our show, because it seems like I wanted to do a segment called Dumb Conspiracy Theory of the Week, because it just seems like the cycle is moving so fast now. It's like kids and furniture, then it's, I don't know, it's something new every day. Yeah. But
well, don't you want to ask me about the word conspiracy theory?
Sure.
So my last question is, what do you know? So we're doing a conspiracy theory episode, and of course our show is about words and phrases. Any insight you can give us into when this term started being used, where'd it come from?
So I can speak to this. My good friend Andrew Mackenzie McCarg, who is a historian who studies the history of scientific thought, has been working on this for about a decade now. And he traces this back. So now that you have newspapers all digitized, you can go back and search for instances of the term popping up. And he was able to get it back to around 1870, where you get the words conspiracy and theory together and in a way that it actually has its own meaning. Mm-hmm. And it pops up in relation to the assassination of President Garfield.
Oh.
And somebody came out with a conspiracy theory about it. I mean, obviously the thing existed before there was a term to address it. But it's at that point where we start differentiating the conspiracy theory from other kinds of theories, right? And there were other words that were used to describe it, like the devil theory and whatnot, which I like that more.
I do too.
The devil theory. And
yeah.
So it starts then. It doesn't get used that much, but it sort of enters the lexicon. And then interestingly enough, there is a conspiracy theory about the term conspiracy theory, where conspiracy theorists say it was invented by the CIA after the Kennedy assassination to shut down any conspiracy theories about the assassination, which is just stupid. Because if that was their plot, first of all, it didn't work because Kennedy assassination theories were like 80% of the country by the mid 70s. So the worst plot ever. And then if they even did it, but then just calling something a term doesn't ascribe any normative meaning to it. So it's not like we're going to call this a conspiracy theory and then it will make it look bad. I mean, that doesn't do
absolutely
that. So.
Right. That's not how it works.
It wasn't the CIA. I mean, everyone knows it was Colonel Sanders and the Pentaveret, I think, got together and made. Oh yeah, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. Well, and everyone knows that the CIA wrote the Scorpions' "Wind of Change." I don't know if you heard that one, but
I actually heard that about 2 weeks ago, but I never liked that song anyway. So
what?
Okay, fair. Hey, well, maybe they did write it then. But
I don't think you should show him your Scorpion's back tattoo today.
Yeah, that'll be next time. Well, Dr. Uscinski, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been very enlightening, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you.